Okay, so this discussion is organizing the debate, and the great bulk of it is going to be about eschewing the line by line. So, uh, we're going to start with what is traditional organization or the line by line, and then we're going to talk about two other methods of organization. And I'm going to try to break it up to provide some examples. So, we'll just see how that goes in terms of the final product. Okay, so the first part of this discussion is traditional debate organization, or what do most judges expect of you when you step into a debate? Most judges anticipate that you will have a line by line debate, which is a chronological pattern of organization. Um, Otherwise known as organized by what happened in time, in a very linear order of time. So the first thing, the second thing, the third thing. All right, and one never jumps around. There's no second thing, then third, then first. Right? It's always one, two, three. All right. So in a traditional line by line debate, the 1AC is flowed, and as a prerequisite to this discussion, you have to have some idea what flowing is. But flowing is the note taking process of debate. Anyways, everybody watching this should have at least that much down. Anyways, so the 1AC is flowed, and in a line by line debate, in a very traditional line by line debate, every contention or observation gets its own piece of paper in the flow. All right, so, uh, you know, the first page would be contention one, and the second page would be contention two, and the third page would be contention three. And that is in anticipation that negatives will have a very deep and meaningful case debate. So technically, in a traditional line by line debate, we don't ever just flow the 1AC straight down a bunch of pieces of paper. And then in a traditional line by line debate, every off case negative argument gets its own piece of paper, and then the on case negative arguments are supposed to be put in their appropriate place. So if you have answers to their advantage one, then you put those on advantage one, and if you have solvency answers, then you put those on a solvency contention. And in a world where they put the solvency at the end of each advantage, then you put the appropriate solvency cards at the end of each appropriate advantage argument. Um, this is a traditional line by line debate flowing style. Now, after this, the flow gets a little bit more complex. In a traditional line by line debate, the 1NC sets the case debate order. So that means for the rest of the debate, the 2AC, the negative block, the 1AR, the 2NR, the 2AR, they're all going to follow the 1NC's order. All right, so 1NC number 3 on the advantage, right? 1NC number 4 on the advantage, 1NC number 1 on the solvency debate, 1NC number 2 on the solvency debate, and so on and so forth. The flow is going to follow that order, and when you say you're going to debate their, prolif advantage, the judge expects that you're going to follow the 1NC order. And you don't necessarily have to start with number 1 when you follow the 1NC order, but in a linear sense, if you're going to talk about number 3 and number 5, then you have to talk about number 3 before you talk about number 5. That's chronological ordering, right? Linear by time. The first thing that happened in time goes first, and then the next thing in time. Okay. So the 1NC case debate sets the order of the flow for the rest of the debate. The 2AC sets the order of the off case debate, and this is why. Off case arguments constitute one argument. What separates an off case from an on case argument is its direct relationship to the 1AC. So the 1NC when it is making an off-case argument, asks itself, is this argument directly related to something the 1AC has said? And if it is direct, if there's a direct relationship to something that was in the 1AC, then that argument goes on case. Even if it's a disadvantage, it still goes on case. But if it's not directly related to one of the advantage scenarios of the 1AC or to the very directly to the solvency evidence of the 1AC, then it goes off case, right? It goes off case. That's how we separate disads and counterclaims, right? Because a disadvantage is not something that the 1AC said, it's something that the 1AC does that is bad, but it wasn't something the 1AC talked about, all right? So that's how you determine off case from on case, and that helps us explain why in a traditional line-by-line debate, we expect that the 2AC will set the order for the line-by-line, because each 1NC argument is a whole. Even though it makes pieces, even though it's in pieces, it's a whole. So I'm going to insert an example here, all right, that I want you to look at here in just a second. But basically all of the many pieces come together to make a whole. All right. Here is my crude example of that. This is my son's turtle puzzle. All right. And each of its pieces make a whole, and you don't have a turtle puzzle unless you have all of its pieces. An off-case argument is like this, right? And this is the link, right? And the back here, that's the impacts and, you know, the uniqueness, right? And the internal links. And it all comes together to make one argument. You'll see that puzzle again. Anyways, my point is that all of those pieces are necessary to make a single argument, and even though they're subpoints that are arguments, no one of those subpoints alone is likely to win you the debate round. You need the sum total of them. In this case, the sum is greater than its parts, and that's true of disadvantages, that's true of counterplans, that's true of critiques, that's true of topicality arguments. The sum is greater than its parts. All right. Now, on case, when the negative is on case, the sum is not greater than its parts. One solvency argument is very powerful, and you don't have to have 6 cards to win one solvency argument. You might even only have an analytic to win one solvency argument. All right. So the parts are important, and that's why the 1NC sets the order for the rest of the debate, because each part is important. So the 2AC sets the order because the 1NC shell gets treated like one argument, like one solid thing, right? And then the 2AC has lots of little parts that respond to that one solid thing. All right. So the 2AC, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, this is how the rest of the debate will now be organized in a traditional flow debate. When the negative block happens, that if the negative says, all right, I'm now going to go to the politics disad, all right, then the judge anticipates that you will answer 2AC number 1 first, then 2AC number 2, 2AC number 3, 2AC number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, however many they are, in the exact 2AC order, in the exact way the 2AC provided them. All right. And it's helpful. Don't use numbers to organize this debate, right? You can't be like, off the 2AC number 2, here's all my answers, blah. All right, the judge will hate you because most judges don't actually write down numbers. They're moving too fast to write down, typing too fast to write down numbers. So they write down arguments. All right, so you would say, all right, off the 2AC number 1, they say no link. Here's my answer to their no link debate. All right. I'm going to talk about the refutation portion in just a second. But what I'm trying to say here is that that's how it's organized. And the judge expects that you will do that. All right. So if the judge says you need to work on your line-by-line skills, this is what they mean. You're not going in the chronological order of the debate. You're either missing arguments or you're mixing up arguments, meaning that you're just doing them in any order you want to do them in, even if you manage to cover them all. And it makes it very hard for a judge who is expecting that that's how they will flow the debate, right? Because you didn't tell them you were gonna do something different. It makes it very hard for the judge to follow the debate. They just don't know where the hell you're going next, all right? And from a judge's perspective, we don't really consider that our fault that we don't know what the hell you're going to talk about next. You, as a debater, have a job to tell me where to put my pen, and that's what traditional line by line debate does. That's its advantage. It always tells me where to put my pen. All right. So, the roadmap is also a part of the line by line. So the roadmap is before the debate where you tell the judge what positions you're going to go to. The judge expects that you will follow your roadmap. All right, you will follow your roadmap and you will use a chronological order on each one of those arguments. And you will respond in the order of the 2AC in off case arguments or in the order of the 1NC on case. All right, and that's what the judge anticipates. All right, when you're the 2AC, the judge does not expect you to answer the link or the uniqueness first on the disad. You're going to group the disad. You're going to group the counterplan, right? Because its sum is greater than its parts. All right, the sum is what matters the most. And because you've grouped it all, we expect that you'll just make a series of arguments that respond to every part of the disad. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that should explain why your front lines are written the way that they're written. All right. Now, some other parts of line by line debate, because we've covered what the line by line is and who sets the order for the line by line. And now I want to talk about how one refutes arguments in the line by line format or in the traditional format. In the traditional format, judges expect you to use a 4-step model of refutation, at least when you're beginning and intermediate. And as you get to the varsity level, some of these nitpicky requirements go by the wayside. But very few people that qualifies for, very few. All right, so for the most part, they're sort of anticipating a 4-step refutation model. So the 4 steps of refutation. 4 steps. All right. Step number 1. Step number 1, they say. All right, they say. And this is where you talk about what your opponent said. What is your opponent's argument? It should be quick, and it should be concise and precise. All right, concise and precise. 2, we say, here is my claim. This is what I'm going to say about my claim. Number 3, because here's the reason my claim is true. All right, and this is where the chunky, meaty, delicious detail is. All right, what is your proof? What is your fact? What is your reasoning? Right, and then number 4, our argument is better because, and this is the part of debate that is comparison, right? Why is your argument better than their argument in a world where you're both right? So the first part, they say, that's the flowing portion that we talked about. That's making sure that you're organized, that you're doing the line by line. The second part, we say, this is your refutation portion where you just hot disagree with them, right? They're wrong. Boo. They're wrong. And because make sure that you have some sort of proof or some sort of line of reasoning to demonstrate the error of their argument. And then our argument is better than theirs is the moment of comparison. In a world where both teams are right, what do we do? And judges are often faced with, I think both teams have a good point. How do I sort out the difference between them? All right. Now, you may do the we say because, we say because, we say because many times over. All right. Sometimes when the 2AC makes a really good argument, you have to have 4 or 5, sometimes upwards in terms of permutation debates, 8 to 10 answers to their single they say. Is an actual case debate flow according to the traditional line by line. The first one is the on-case debate, which will be controlled by the 1NC, and the second picture is an off-case argument, which will be controlled by the 2AC. And as you notice, they go tit for tat with each other. Okay, so theoretically, what you just watched was some line by line on a flow so that you could sort of see visually what it looks like in terms of arguments going back and forth and how judges sort of arrange that portion of the debate. I want to talk really quickly as I'm finishing the traditional debate section about some of the types of line by line debate, traditional line by line debate that aren't traditional but are important things to know. And those couple of things are overviews, top level, and strategic grouping. Okay, so the first is overviews. Overviews really aren't traditional because they don't go directly back and forth, and judges rarely expect that they will go directly back and forth. And they are exactly like what they sound, an overview, meaning that they happen before you start the line by line. So they're sort of at the top, if you will, if you can imagine imaginary flow, piece of paper. Down here is the line by line, and up here is the overview. An overview is really, well, it's a couple of things. First, it is a strategic explanation of your argument. So, this is what we're trying to say. And then it usually positions a couple of strategic arguments up at the top of the debate, things that you think are relevant to the whole of the debate, right? A sum argument, right? Like this impact argument. I'm going to make the argument that this is the biggest impact in the debate. And I don't want to have to say that 5 times on the line by line. The idea of an overview is it's supposed to save you time. You should not repeat the arguments in the overview on the line by line. But an overview should never, particularly in traditional debate, be a substitute for the line by line, right? You still have to get to every portion of the debate in that chronological pattern and answer it, right? So the 2AC and then your argument, the 2AC and your argument, the 2AC and your argument. You have to do that. Still a required portion of the debate. So in traditional line by line debate, overviews should be relatively short, 30 seconds. This is what my argument is, and here is a strategic argument that I think is going to impact the whole debate, and that's why I'm making it. Now, top level arguments are this new phrase that people are using, or relatively new phrase that people are using, and it seems to be kind of like an overview inside of the line by line, right? So these are permutation answers that apply to every perm in the debate. Doesn't matter if it's do both, all non-competitive parts, double bind, do the alt, right? These are all different types of permutations that are very classic. Doesn't matter. These answers apply to all of those. All right, kind of like an overview inside of the line by line. I will say this. Judges don't much care for overview proliferation. The world started a decade and a half ago with, wouldn't it be awesome if we put an overview at the top of our critique or at the top of our dissad? And that would have strategic uses for us. And now it's become, in the negative block, for every argument I want to take seriously, I put an overview. Right, and it's also turned into, I have an overview here with no strategic value to it whatsoever. Nobody would ever have to answer it. It's totally irrelevant. And I forget to go to the arguments half the time, so nobody knows what to do with this thing called overview. And there's this global overview versus position overview. So a global overview is like an overview for the whole debate, right? And this usually happens in the 2AR and the 2NR, and it's like these are the 3 reasons you're going to vote for me, and they span the whole of the debate. A position overview is just on one argument, right? Just this one argument explains my dissad and gives some big strategic argument, 1, 2, maybe 3, right? But when you think about it, if you have 5 arguments in the 1NC, and then in the negative block you decide 3 of those are just the bomb, you've got to have them. So you have overviews on 3 arguments. And then in the 2NR, you have a global overview. There are now 4 friggin' overviews. And then in the 2AR, they're going to do their own overview. There's going to be 5 friggin' overviews in this debate. How much more over the debate can you possibly view it? And this is why I say judges they don't much care for overview proliferation. It's kind of gotten out of hand, and you should probably avoid the global overview in a world where you're just going for one argument. Just put it on the overview that you already started. Last thing I want to talk about in traditional line by line is strategic grouping, because in a traditional line by line debate, time is of the essence. If football is a game of inches, debate is a game of seconds. And that's why you have that stupid timer that you're always watching, because debate is a game of seconds. So, Grouping. Why does one group? Well, first, grouping saves time, right? I don't have to repeat myself because I'm going to lump similar arguments together. Second, grouping prevents repetition, right? I don't have to say the same thing on 6 different flows. Um, and third, grouping demonstrates strategic critical thinking. I am aware that there are arguments that are the same happening in the debate and that I don't need to repeat myself a bunch of times in order to deal with those same arguments. So, how do you group? Well, first, you have to tell the judge that you're grouping things. This is a traditional line by line debate. Everything, you have to tell the judge everything, right? So, you would literally say, group the two AC's first, second, and third arguments, or group the negatives, topicality, and framework argument, right? In a world where you're gonna just KT anyways, you might as well just group those two things. Um, and then uh, after that, um, you answer the arguments based on your grouping. Obviously, you have to be right about your grouping. If you like group a bunch of things that aren't similar, you're screwed. Um, grouping is something to do when you're running out of time, right? Like at the bottom of your 1AR and you're like, oh God, I missed like 4 arguments on this disad. Group them, right? And here's some things that I'm going to say. It's sloppy to group that way, and you're not going to get strategic thinking points. But in a debate where the negative has made uh, an impact argument at the top of every flow, right? And it's all like nuclear war outweighs. You can just say group the nuclear war impact calculus. Here are my answers why human rights are more important or why ontology comes first, right? Uh, Grouping helps you see the interconnected portions of the debate so that you can recognize, hey, look, I have read 2 disads in this debate, and the affirmative has said in both of these disads that the case outweighs. Now, I have a nuclear war impact scenario on both disads. I mean, yes, the internal links are different there, but the terminal impact, the nuclear war, is the same. So I'm not going to answer that twice. I'm not going to say nuclear outweighs twice. Instead, I'm going to answer nuclear outweighs on one disad, and I'm going to say group this impact argument, and then I don't have to answer it on the other disad. It's already taken care of, right? Uh, things like that demonstrate strategic thinking, and the judge thinks, yes, you can see the whole debate happening. Brilliant, awesome, more speaker points for you. Okay, so there's a lot more to traditional debate. We'll get other chances to talk about it, but that concludes our organizing yourself along a line by line or traditional debate. By the way, never use quoting fingers in a debate.